this up in my headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because a kind of episode like this only comes like 14 times. And that could only mean...
maybe 15 if we read the prequel.
Potentially 15. So this doesn't happen every day. And that could only mean that we are continuing our discussion, our buddy read of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Today we are discussing Book 3, The Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Charles, this has been my favorite of the 3 Wheel of Time books that we have read so far. And we'll get a little bit more into that, but since we have read 3 books, I want to give a heads up that in these buddy read discussions, we do have spoilers up through the books that we have read so far in the series. So that means if you haven't read up to book 3 yet, that's The Dragon Reborn, what this episode is about, then if you're interested in the series, now's a great time to go pick this series up and catch up before the show comes out. But if you don't want any spoilers, you might want to turn this down in your headphones right now before we get into this episode and then come back later when you're ready to hear the whole thing.
That's well said, Dylan. I'll also add that if you've only read the first 3 books, you're in the right place. We're not spoiling anything after book 3 either.
We better not, because I've not ever read past book 3.
Exactly. Dylan is not
so
capable
you,
of
Charles,
it, so it's all on me. And Dylan's going to keep me honest here. And so welcome. Let's get right into it. Your favorite book so far, I think that's fair. Although I would say I think there's moments in The Great Hunt that really stand out for me, but I think as a whole, like the Dragon Reborn is a better book. But man, the highs of The Great Hunt are higher than the highs in Dragon Reborn, I would say.
I would agree with that. I think like Nynaeve's test to become accepted, that sticks out as one of the most memorable moments that we've had yet.
All the Damani
was in the Great Hunt
subplot had me pulled in more than anything else. But Nynaeve is number 1, I would say.
I hear ya.
And then the Damani, but then a lot of stuff in this book. So,
right. Well, I think I'm just so. I'm starting to figure this out more and more about myself as we're reading Wheel of Time. Is I'm so character focused that I find if I like reading about a particular character, it pretty much like doesn't really matter if they're doing anything or not. And I prefer that even to like really epic things happening with characters that I don't care as much about. And I'll say we got a lot of time with my favorite character in this series, in this book. Egwyne really got a
I was going to ask you, which character are we dancing around here? And it's Egwyne.
Oh, not dancing around. Yeah. I mean, if there's a character that loves dancing, it's probably Egwyne, and there's no reason to dance around her. We got a lot of time with her. She gets a ton of plot going on around her, searching for those Black Aja and all that stuff. So I enjoyed that we got a lot more of her, and we also didn't get a ton of a character that we usually get a lot of, which is Rand.
Yes.
Right? That's the least Rand that we've gotten, maybe ever by a long shot.
But you know what? To me, it was more impactful than really were in Rand's head all the time. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about towards the beginning of the episode is Robert Jordan's restrained use of Rand in a book called The Dragon Reborn. right? So
Yes.
this book always stood out to me as the one where Rand is kind of off doing his own thing, and we don't really get in his head that often. I mean, the first two books, he's the overwhelming majority of the POV time in both books, and now he's kind of off
Yeah.
doing his own thing, and it's interesting to like be checking up on him every once in a while throughout the book, but it's very light, and he's going through some confusing stuff. He's like figuring stuff out, and he's kind of like a mystery, and that to me was more interesting than anything he's done in the other two books, just personally.
Yeah, I mean, the Rand stuff, I said in the last episode that we did on this series, in our Great Hunt episode, I said that I'm much more interested in other people's perspectives of Rand than I am of Rand himself.
Right.
And I think that a book that gives you the chance to get a lot more perspective on Rand because of the way that the plot is moving around him, even if it's not actually centered in his head to the same extent that we usually get. I think the book was well served by that, and I think actually, in that way, I, I think that was part of the thing that made the Dragon Reborn stick out here was this Rand stuff. It's like he's such a strong Taveren. Is
Yes.
that how you say it, Charles?
Yep.
So such a strong Taveren that the world, the wheel just weaves everything around him, right? If he passes through a town, then he'll just basically force this almost destiny to start moving way faster, and like people start getting married and these big events start happening.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, oh well, Rand came through here and he makes the things start going toward their destiny, and that's a big Wheel of Time bit. And I feel like what's kind of cool here is the Taveren bit is about that, and getting to be a lot more in the heads of the people who are getting pulled in all sorts of directions by Rand helps us understand this kind of Rand obsession that was going on in the Great Hunt, where it's like he doesn't even really have to be involved that much, and everything still moves around him because of who he is as the Dragon Reborn. So it made me kind of like get it more with Rand, and I really appreciated the way that Jordan chose to implement his character here.
Yeah, that's really well said, because the first two books, how many times are we told, oh, I'm not the Dragon Reborn, I'm just a shepherd, or oh, he is the Dragon Reborn, he's going to be so powerful, he's Taveren, he pulls people around him. Like, we've been told this nonstop for two books, two pretty decently long books, and then now we finally get to see, I know, Dylan, another thing that we always love in characters is that they're proactive, and Rand finally is like, I'm going off, like I just gotta go, and he's finally starting to channel and all these other things and like use the one power, and like his, as he's getting more unhinged and he's more free with the power, we start to see the effect it has on the world. And like you said, it's so interesting to watch like Moraine and Perrin walk in his wake, kind of.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, we know he's been here because 1,000 people just got married in a really weird way. Or, oh, this person fell off a tower and is totally fine. It's like, that's only something that Rand's influence could do. And it's pulling them along as well. So it's so interesting. And then we get those moments where Rand is fighting dark hounds and all these other things.
Yeah.
And by the time we get to him at the end, it kind of makes him a little more epic because we don't know what he's been up to and what he's capable of. And like, we've always seen him as the whiny kid who claims he's a shepherd. And we're watching him kind of grow a little bit in this book. And that was refreshing for the Rand character for sure, and his arc.
Yeah. Here's the way I see it, Charles, and I'm only 3 books into this 14-book series, so give me a break if I'm way off here. But I feel like the Rand arc to this point, the first couple books were about Rand accepting to himself that he is the Dragon Reborn. And then this book, entitled The Dragon Reborn, was about everyone else coming to realize that he is indeed the true Dragon Reborn.
Right.
And it kind of ends with that, where the Great Hunt ended with this moment of like, Rand is like, okay, fine, I'm the Dragon Reborn.
Right.
I get it. And then this one ends with everyone else being like, okay, he's wielding Kalendor.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
guy
So
is the Dragon
what
Reborn.
you're saying is the Great Hunt is Rand accepting he's the Dragon Reborn, and then the Dragon Reborn is Rand proving that he's the Dragon Reborn.
And other people accepting him.
Right, that's the
like,
proving element of like, okay, he's proven it. He's got Kalendor. He's slayed all these dark friends. Like, okay, I get what he's, and then all the Aela are like, we're with you now, Rand.
Right, and so Charles, I think this all wrapped these first 3 books up for me in a way where the first 2 books and Rand's constant reluctance around this, right. Oh yeah, I'm a shepherd from the 2 rivers, and all this stuff that made him come off a little bit bratty and not as proactive as we often like with our protagonists. I think the way that this all went and Jordan's use of Rand in this very restrained way here just made it all feel so much more deliberate and all as this like building toward who Rand eventually becomes, where now we as readers get to see him in the Dragon Reborn a little bit more through the eyes that all these other people are seeing him through, where it's like, this is just some epic dude who shows up and like wrecks Beelzemon out of nowhere with his channeling ability being ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's why everyone's obsessed with Rand. Yeah. When we're in his head and he's like, I'm just a shepherd. It's like, why does anyone care about you?
Yeah.
But it all feels like building now toward what he started to become. And I mean, there's so much more to read that I can only imagine how much more epic he's going to become from here. But I don't know. The Dragon Reborn just tied that together so much better for me. So
yeah, really, and I think it all comes back to Robert Jordan's restrained use of him, because like you said, we get the same impression that everyone else gets when he just shows up on the scene at the climax of this novel and is just wielding the one power and slaying people and having this historic artifact, Kalendor, to like these huge walls of flame, and he's just busting people. It's like, okay, wow, like they're like, Rand has been doing his thing on the sidelines, and now we're actually seeing him in this new light, which I think was easier to do when we've been removed from him for so long.
Yes.
It's like, okay, he's like not the same person that he was in the first 2 books. Like that journey from, when he leaves the Mountains of Mist to eventually making it all the way to the stone. It's like, okay, he's like clearly been affected by his ability to channel and what he was doing off on his own, and we finally get to see him in that new light and accept him really as the Dragon Reborn, which we like knew was inevitable, but it was hard to see him that way when we were in his head for so long.
Yes. And this is something that I'm starting to realize how well Jordan does of this, is when we, the reader, get to experience things in the way that our characters do. That's when the reading experience is very strong, I think. And I get that we were supposed to be experiencing this constant like reluctance and this constant, oh no, like how could I actually be this when I'm a shepherd?
Right.
We've been supposed to experience that the whole time, and we weren't supposed to necessarily see Rand as just this awesome epic hero, despite the fact everyone was treating him that way. And now I guess I learned that Jordan is capable of, like, I trust Robert Jordan more as an author after this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I guess,
fair.
which is I know we've said he's on the Mount Rushmore of fantasy authors,
right.
And I think that's fair. And I know so many people have him as their favorite author ever, and I think I'm starting to get it more. I'm starting to understand
and
Robert Jordan,
as we get
what he's
further
doing.
away from the first book, we start to get further away from those Lord of the Rings tropes that you can't help but think about, and like this idea of, oh, he's the chosen one. It's like, we know that going into this. So to finally see these characters getting a little more fleshed out, going a little further beyond what we've seen, how we've seen these tropes play out in series like Lord of the Rings, we finally get to see these characters like natively in Robert Jordan's world. And one of the things that stands out for me in this whole book is the restrained use of Rand, and I just
For
I
sure.
thought it was brilliant. Like imagine like not seeing a certain character in Lord of the Rings for so long, and then they just show up and wreck stuff up. It's like, oh wow, that was like that just doesn't happen. We're so close to the characters and they're epic all the time. So it really like taking the time to have Rand earn it was well done here by Jordan.
Well said, Charles.
So let's go on to some other characters here. We know we love Rand, great use of Rand, but Perrin got a lot of POV time in this story as well. And I wonder what was your impression of Perrin as we went into book 3 here, or by the end of it now.
Mm. He started off really strong,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like. And I was, I sent out a tweet, Charles, that was a poll asking hashtag Twitter of Time their favorite of the Perrin, Rand, and Matt trio there. And it was right when I was toward the start of the Dragon Reborn, I was saying that Perrin was starting to stick out to me. And I like this arc. I know Perrin, at least you said Perrin's pretty much your favorite, right, Charles?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. He's the most interesting to me. Like it's a kind of trope that I feel like Perrin's kind of the genesis of. It's very interesting to think about his place in the timeline of fantasy tropes. That's like reluctant nobility about him. I find super interesting.
Nobility in the sense of like having a strong moral code.
Yeah, like he's one of the Taveren. He's up there with, he's Rand's best friend, but he's like much more, he's not Rand. he's like the tier below. So the fact that he's still Taveren, but the tier below, like it's an interesting position for a character to be in.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the supporting role, but he's actually got a pretty impressive resume himself. It's interesting in that way.
Yeah, I guess noble. I was thinking of this. There's this synonym or not synonym. The word can mean like a lord is a noble, and it can also mean noble in the sense of having this almost moral fortitude.
Yeah, he's a moral
and you mean
guy.
It more the moral fortitude.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think with Perrin, it's this. I see what you're getting at when you compare him to characters like Jon Snow, or I know you mentioned like Fitzchivalry and stuff like that, as these folks that maybe are of the Perrin mold, because Perrin came before both of them. And I see him as almost having this workman-like, he's the blacksmith,
exactly,
and he is more, for lack of a better way to put it, like blue collar feeling than the other characters. Where Rand, he is a shepherd, but everyone looks at him and instantly thinks he's a lord if he wears the right clothes. And Matt, we'll get to him more, but he's got this sort of like roguish charm to him that starts to emerge in this book. But Perrin's kind of a simple dude with a simple understanding of the world. And he's not wrong, I think, for seeing things that way, but it's a little more like black and white. He's not an overthinker, and he's willing to do what it takes, whether he likes it or not.
Right.
And I think he's got something to him. I will say he came in last, Charles, in that poll, which
that doesn't surprise me. Like I get some Faramir vibes from him, kind of, where it's like this is a really interesting guy, but he's just in the shadow of other characters. He's just not doing the cool stuff Rand is doing, and certainly in this book, he's not doing the cool stuff Matt's doing. Matt's doing some really interesting stuff. Perrin is just like, I'm following Rand. It's like, okay, like how can you be voted the best character when all you're doing is following one of the other characters? It's like there's only so much being interesting can get you. So that's kind of always how I felt. It's like the Faramir condition. It's like, Boromir did all the interesting stuff.
Second fiddle.
Yeah, second fiddle for sure. But I like Faramir as a character so much, and I like Perrin so much. I kind of appreciate these characters that because they're not in that main role, they have some breathing room to have some really interesting thoughts and come up with some really interesting ideas and philosophies, and they're not so caught up in the plot. They can kind of be their own person a little bit, and they have that flexibility. And Perrin is like that, which always interests me.
Yeah, it's interesting because this Taveren bit, it almost feels like what Jordan has done is made this like plot focused storytelling a part of the literal like narrative, if that makes sense, because it's like there's certain things that Rand has to do for the plot, and in a less deft author's hand, they might just make that start to happen in a way that doesn't feel at all true to the characters or true to the world or true to the story. But in Robert Jordan's hand, he's like, well, what if I just make that a force that is a part of my world, and then everything starts to fall into place,
the threads
and feel
of the pattern
justified. Yeah, and it's just very interesting because it's like, I don't know, it's kind of clever, and I think that so Rand almost needs to be more plot focused because he's the strongest Taveren, and there are certain things that he has to do to almost play out the way that the wheel weaves. And it's like Perrin, I don't know enough about Wheel of Time yet to say where he ranks in the Taveren rankings here, but I would feel pretty confident he's well below Rand, and I would say he seems a little bit less like tugged by the Taveren string than even his Mat, and that does give him more autonomy to kind of be his own person. And
at the same time, though, he is the one in this book that gets to say, like, these Aes Sedai, they're pulling me along. Like, I don't want to listen to them, yet I'm going to follow them still, you know? So, like, Perrin got that role this time around. So it's like, oh, okay, another one of these where it's like, I can't trust her. I just want to be a blacksmith, but okay, I'm going to keep following her and do whatever she says.
Yeah.
So, it's, he can't escape it too much, but it's part of the pattern. Rand is pulling them along, and he's a part of it, whether he wants to be or not, which is another interesting thing that he has to balance. So yeah, just to see his humility and his really modest life goals balanced against the like epic nature of like the kind of person that he is has always been interesting to me. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't see that being the crowd favorite.
Yeah, he does get this interesting juxtaposition of wanting to, like, still wanting to be a blacksmith, where I think the other characters are more and more being willing to leave their old lives behind.
For sure.
And Perrin is the one who's still most struggling with that.
Yes.
And he's also the one who, for me, it's always seemed the most justified.
Yeah, I like these scenes at the end where he's working at the blacksmith shop and he's taking pride in his work, and the blacksmith is like, hey, you're pretty good. Like, you could keep working for me. Like, you're so much better than my last guys. And Vail was watching him work and was into it, So it's like those moments I really liked for Perrin, and that's in this book kind of where he shined. And you really get to see the sense of like, this idea of like, oh, I am a good blacksmith. I enjoy doing this. This is all I really want from life. But then there's this Taveren nature that's pulling me, and then I can't ignore either. And you really see him balancing that. And then obviously the heavy-handed metaphor of the hammer and the axe, like in the same spot against the wall, right? Like, oh, which one am I going to wear today? So it's just, that was his arc in this book. So
yeah, no, I think it's pretty good with Perrin, and yeah, that's kind of why I was trying to get at with the justified bit, but you said it so well, Charles, is this idea that he's like, it feels true to his character that he's still dealing with that, while when Rand was really struggling.
I'm just a shepherd. It's like, we've never seen you interact with a sheep ever.
Yeah, exactly. You do not seem to have a lot of passion for sheep.
We see Perrin like walking into a blacksmith shop. It's like, you could be doing anything, and you choose to go to work at a blacksmith shop in your downtime. It's like, that's my hobby. It's what I like to do.
you know what else it is, Charles? Is like Perrin's built for blacksmithing.
Yeah.
Like when he's first introduced, it's like this broad-shouldered apprentice who's just as broad-shouldered as the master, and it's like it's easy to imagine Perrin is just falling into that role. Well, you've made fun of Rand sometimes as being this like 6'7", ridiculously handsome dude walking around like look at me, I'm just a shepherd. Like where are those sheep at?
Yes, chiseled good looks. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like. And it's like, dude, you stick out like a sore thumb over here. But Perrin, no sore thumbs because he's such a good blacksmith. He'd never hammer himself in the thumb over there.
Very well said. And then you have Matt as well, who's just like admits he's like, I can never go back to that. That was horrible. Like, he immediately is like, let's do this adventure and gambling all day long. Like,
for sure.
Like that's all I want. Which it's so funny to see the three of them kind of like in the same situation, but how they handle it from the nature of their character, you know, and they're three very different ends of this triangle. And Perrin was just the one that I feel like has been the most believable since the beginning. Like you said, Rand, he kept saying he's a shepherd from the Two Rivers, and you're like, dude, you were never a shepherd from the Two
Look
Rivers.
Look in a mirror.
Yeah. We're Perrin.
Look at one of those bazillion mirrors in your dreams of Beelzebub.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, dude, you not the case. But yeah, I love these moments with Perrin. I don't know. For some reason Perrin pulls to me. But I gotta say, for this book, I think Matt steals the show, in my opinion. And I wanted to get your opinion because, like, you've had this thing for a while. Like, I don't get what everyone sees in Matt, and I wanted to hear from you. Like, has Matt won you over yet by the end of this book?
I think the short answer is probably yes.
Okay.
I'm not always the best at short answers, but I think that he's certainly starting to is maybe the better way to phrase it. And you know, I love these roguish characters. I really love the Lies of Locke Lamora and the Gentleman Bastard sequence, which, as we all know, you haven't gotten the chance to read yet, Charles. Shout out to Benjamin. And
it's Dylan's fault, remember that.
Yeah. So then there is a falcon. Fail, right? Is the
Fail, yeah.
So, and you were called a falconer at some point, Charles.
Yeah, by Phantology. I don't know how to take that, but I have a feeling it's
probably not
good.
well,
yeah.
Charles.
I don't feel great about it.
Right. So then, to move back toward Wheel of Time and not Gentleman Bastard, you know, I love these roguish characters, and that's why you and others have told me that I'm gonna really love Matt, and I can definitely see that starting to show itself now. And when we've got that, was it our first point of view chapter of Matt ever, Charles, in this book? Is that accurate?
I want to say yes, that's accurate.
It felt,
and if it
wasn't,
wasn't,
like,
then it was
it.
one of the super first, but I think it was.
I wasn't ever tracking it as a thing. I think I kind of took for granted
when he blew the horn of Valir or not, but
no, I don't think so. And as someone who knows, you know, anyone on Twitter time or wherever else,
if
feel
they
free
did,
to
it
contact
was
us. And
very brief. You know, it was never like Matt's the POV character. This is the first time, and he's got a lot of time in this book as well.
Oh, a lot, yeah. And my first reaction when we started to get in Matt's head was like, RJ, what have you been doing having this character that has so much personality just like in the back seat, unconscious, trying to deal with the dagger situation? It's like, dude, you had like 1,500 pages or whatever before this to start having this character out there doing these interesting and fun things. And he finally started to do that. And it was like from the first POV with Matt, I was immediately like, okay, like, here we go.
Yes,
because I could just tell.
Yeah, that's so well said. And Matt's just like the voice where you're like, yes, because he's the only one that like actually escapes the Aes Sedai and goes on and does his own thing. And you're like, this is what all these other characters are talking about doing. And the first chance Matt gets, he's gone. And you know how
Yes.
he always does it when he gets that opportunity. Like, say what you will about Matt being mischievous or whatever, but he knows what he's about, and he's not ashamed to like make the decision that's gonna get him there. Where it's like, oh, you can give me this paper and I can escape. Great, I'm out of here. Bye. And it's like, oh, I can fight you guys. Like, you know, he's the most.
Yeah.
His self-confidence is so refreshing in this book when you have to read about Matt and Perrin, and you're like, finally, here's a character that knows what he's about, like just wants to have fun doing his own thing, and then sometimes, you know, he feels morally obligated to help his friends, and he's willing to do that, and we like him for that. So it's like, yes, finally we've got a character that feels honest, that we as the audience can relate to in a lot of ways, and it's juxtaposed so well against Rand and Perrin, who are like, oh, no more Aes Sedai tricks. It's like, okay, like, then go, then leave. Like, do what Matt did.
Charles. That's well said. Yeah, no, Matt gets out of there as quick as he can, and he is way more proactive and committed, it seems like, than a lot of the other characters have been so far. And he's like, okay, well, I need money. For some reason, my luck has gone through the roof lately, and he figures it out very quickly. And he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep taking people's money by gambling over and over and over again. I'll just keep going to different inns, keep getting different people's money, and then I'll have enough. And it's like this very straight through line thinking and execution without reluctance from Matt is definitely appreciated. He's got this kind of charming perspective on the world. He's fun. The luck device, we can talk more about that, but that I found that to be very interesting. Before we get there, I do want to say that the cons for me of Matt as well, his interactions with women are
he's a bit old-fashioned,
pretty cringe. I mean, like, it's one of those things. I know we were told by Twitter of time to look back while both being willing to acknowledge our modern perspective and be courteous to the context of when Robert Jordan was writing. But I'm like, dude, Matt, like, so he's cringeworthy.
He's a bit of a womanizer, women. Yeah, but not even a good one. He's like a cringy one. He's like, oh, exactly. I just want to give her a kiss on the cheek. It's like, dude, what are you talking about?
What do you do? Yeah, it's all this, like, stealing kisses is like a phrase that he uses a bunch of times. I'm like, dude, he's got very, don't ever use that phrase, please.
1950s TV kind of like TV dad vibes to how he treats women. You know, it's like, ooh, bizarre. It's like, hey, lady, you want to come over here for a kiss? It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, I just saved your life. You're not going to even, like, give me a smooch? And then he say that. But, you know, it's basically, like, where he's at. And you're like, ooh.
So it's like Matt gets my biggest cringes of reading this of anyone, but also, like, when he does these interesting things with luck, it's my, like, biggest fist pumps probably too. So he's like, you know, I think that it's just,
I mean, you could see him like being a cringy teenager also. Like, that's just, you know, it's weird to
people
read.
don't treat him like he's doing that though.
Yeah,
like,
that's
the world around him, like, because that's the thing, you know, I always use that teenager defense with Quoth and Denna a lot with the Kingkiller Chronicle, but the world interacts with them in a way where it's like clear that Rothfuss is getting across that they're actually, like, they are being kind of these, like, I won't get into that too much, but the world interacts with them in a way that indicates they are being teenagers about things, and we're supposed to take it that way. With Matt, it feels like the women around him are like, oh, like, he is so charming though deep down. Not the three who know him. Which maybe,
no, I think that's well said. I think you're explaining something that I've just subconsciously also, like, why does this make me uncomfortable? And I think you kind of are touching on some really great points there. It is the fact that he's, like, you know, kind of getting away with, for lack of a better word, all these weird behavior quirks. I mean, the women around him, like his friends, don't really like him at all, which is fun to see. Like,
they see through
like
him.
He saves their lives, and they still are mad at him, and like won't thank him because they know he's, like, too in love with himself that like they don't want to give him that victory of like, thank you, Matt, for saving us.
Exactly.
It'd be like,
yeah.
Matt, like, why are you here?
Exactly. Yeah.
They're already frustrated with him.
I
like that dynamic.
Yeah.
It was like, I just saved your bloody lives. Like, you're not even going to thank me? And they're like, be quiet, Matt. I'm sick of you.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. And I think that makes me feel as a reader like what Robert Jordan's trying to get across is like, well, Matt's so charming and quick-witted at first that you just can't help but fall for him. But then when you get to know him, it's like, this guy is such a mischievous little rascal that you don't want any part of him. And it's like, but also he's not, like, if I would think his first impression on these women that he's interacting with would not be a good one either. So I think they would just like, it wouldn't be this like, oh, he's charming at first, but then he's not. It'd just be like, he's creepy. Like, what is he doing?
Yeah, like, don't talk to him that much. He's kind of weird.
Yeah. So I think, they'd just be quicker to get to where Egwyne and Nynaeve are with it. And Elaine, it's pretty quick to get there, too.
Exactly. So, and I really liked that relationship where they kind of reluctantly were like, oh, man, he's the one we got to work with, So they're trying to talk to him. They're like, hey, Matt, how's it going?
That was a good moment.
Yeah. And Matt's like, what's going on here?
It's like you three would never be nice to me if you didn't want something from me.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's also,
it's a mutually
they're
beneficial
offering
arrangement.
He wants,
yeah, because Nynaeve's like, I think I know someone who'd be willing to leave the tower and, and like make a deals, like, which that was a fun moment for me. Where it's like, she's talking about Matt, and you're like, oh, that's funny. I really enjoyed that. That was a funny moment when she's like laughing in bed and she's like, I think I know who we can get to leave the White Tower and deliver that letter. And it was Matt. And that was a funny scene. I do like a lot of Matt moments. And yeah, you got to look past some of that weird stuff in his character to appreciate what Robert Jordan is intending to do, which is write this mischievous character in a world that kind of isn't prepared for him. Like, Matt just kind of gets away with a lot of stuff and has fun doing a lot of stuff, and that's kind of his roguish qualities coming out.
Yeah, and I think that his roguish qualities are most entertainingly on display when he's doing stuff with luck. And there's a device that I feel like I actually haven't seen a lot in modern fantasy to make. It's another one of those things like Robert Jordan takes these things that are sometimes kind of implicit. It's like roguish characters are a lot of times lucky and like these kind of silly, rascally like incidents happen to them. And something like when he gets into that brawl with the guy and he just flings them both off of off of a roof or something like that. And then the guy's dagger that Matt is fighting just stabs himself through the heart just by luck. But Matt knows that his luck actually works really well in those random chance moments. So he does it intentionally to make that guy basically die by his own blade. And I think it's like you might have moments like that in a lot of stories, but very rarely do people literalize it in the way that Jordan has, where it's just like, no, luck is a legitimate force that for whatever reason loves Matt. And that is going to make all of these things happen Matt, I just love how Matt takes advantage of
he just accepts
luck.
it. He's like, oh, good.
This is a thing now. So how can I get money off of it? How can I save my life with it? How can I wield it? And it's like that reluctance that some of these other characters are, for lack of a better way of saying it, characterized by, where it's like Rand would be like overthinking everything about it. Sure. Perrin would be like, is it even right to do this? And Matt is just like, okay, well, how do I take advantage of this?
And both Rand is like, no, I'm just a shepherd. I can't channel. And Perrin's like, I can't talk to wolves. I don't know what you're talking about. And Matt's like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to go gamble now. So I think the crowd gets won over even more when they hear that. It's like, finally, someone willing to embrace the weird stuff that's happening to him,
Exactly.
It's like, Perrin's like, I can't talk to wolves. I'm shutting them out. Like, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And you're like, oh, dude, why?
Like, it's cool. You can hear wolves.
Think of all the stuff you could have been doing to this
Gold
point.
eyes?
Like, Matt would have found a way to have fun with it by now. Just the nature of his character.
Exactly.
But he just happened to be the one that like luck favors sometimes and random chances, and he's found a way to make that work for him right away, and he embraces it. Like, I love Matt in that he's down for anything, and he's always embracing stuff. Like, he'll blow the horn of Elir. It's like, you're linked to that for life now, right? And he's like, I guess. And then, he takes the dagger, and he's willing to throw himself in there, and I appreciate that about Matt. Even if he doesn't know what's going on, he knows, he's like, let's see what happens. Like, let's just do something and see how the dice fall, essentially.
Nice dice drop.
Thank
there,
you.
Charles. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that about Matt, and that's when I first started. That was like the first moment in the Great Hunt where I was like, oh, like, Matt, nice, way to blow the horn. And he's started to come into his own. We get these POVs, and to bring it back to the question, Matt's starting to win me over, I think, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And that, I think I'm looking forward to your thoughts on Matt as these books develop. Because
he won the poll.
He won the poll, and the Twitter sphere keeps telling you directly, like, oh, Dylan, you should like Matt, So we're going to keep touching back. We're going to keep going back to this point, Dylan. We're going to track your opinions of Matt as the series goes on, and I'm looking forward to more about that. But for now, let's go back to one of these characters who you said is your favorite, which is Egwyne, and this moment that I said has been one of my favorites throughout the whole series, which is going through the test of the accepted. Because, like, we saw it with Nynaeve, and we both talked a long time about how much we enjoyed that. So I wanted to kind of get your reaction on how you felt about Egwyne's test for the accepted now that we kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, I think that I said before, Charles, Nynaeve's test for the test of the accepted, is it? Or for the test of the accepted? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's
Charles?
the test or the trial, I forget. It's one of those.
Sure. Either way, apologies to the big time fans if we're messing this up, but the Nynaeve's test stuck out as more memorable just of the kind of things that were happening than Egwene's for whatever reason, or maybe the novelty of doing it for the first time in the last book, and this time it was kind of like, okay, here we go again. I did enjoy this part with Egwyne for sure. The first couple ones, like, she goes in 3 times. And the first couple were like, okay, like, we're doing like, she's married to Rand. It's like, been there, done that 100 times in the last book. So I'm like, fine, whatever. Let's keep rolling. Though I do have a theory from that one. My theory is there's a character that shares a name with one of the Black Aja. It's like Egwene and Rand's daughter shares a name with one of the Black Aja there. And they say at one point, it's Joya is the name. So Joya is the name of both a Black Aja, so that means an Aes Sedai who, like, turned to the Dark One's side. And that's, like, the oldest of the Black Aja. And Elaine, I think, or someone said, like, could be our grandmother's great-grandmother or something like that. And it was also the name of Egwene and Rand's daughter in one of the Test of the Accepted moments. So I have a theory that basically Egwene was inhabiting a real past version of herself in this, like, turning of the wheel. And that daughter was actually this Joya character.
Interesting.
So basically Joya is an actual, like, daughter of a past reincarnation type of thing of the wheels turning of Egwene and of the dragon reborn of that time. That's like the Rand equivalent. So that might be nonsense, but that's my theory. But besides that, I was like, whatever, to the first one. Like, we've seen Rand and Egwene together. And then the second version of what they do is kind of this interesting moment of, like, Rand's telling Egwene to kill him, and she won't do it, basically. but it's a third one that's really interesting, which is where Egwene gets to be the Amberlin seat and has Rand brought to her as kind of like, you gotta do away with this. What do they call it?
Stilling.
Stilling. Yes, you've got to still him, and she refuses to do it. And then she's like knocked out, and she's trying to save him. And it was a really epic moment, which I was like it's a bummer this is a dream, because this would be super not dream, but like a dream sequence
trial
thing, and the dust accepted. And
not
you know she's gonna pass, right? You're not like, oh, she's gonna stay and save save this Rand that maybe does or doesn't exist. It's like she's gonna leave. But it felt like it'd be super suspenseful and awesome if this was happening in a future book, and I feel like it will. So now I'm like, okay, Egwene's gonna become Amberlin. I'm Amerlin, not Amberlin. Amerlin?
I think,
is that how you say it?
That's how sometimes it's said in the audiobooks, but it's not consistent.
So I thought it was really cool. I think, though, the best thing about it would have been the suspense of her trying to save Rand, and that part didn't feel real yet. But I'm hoping that that's like a moment we'll get to actually live out in like book 12 or
because it is interesting.
What.
Like, she is training to be Aes Sedai, and if an Aes Sedai found out that a man was channeling, they're supposed to still them. Like, that's in their DNA as Aes Sedai. So like, Rand is a man that can channel, so maybe he gets a pass because he's a dragon reborn, but it's still like a contention. You don't know. And like, I will agree with you that it's like, oh, we've seen these alternate universes of Egwene and Rand play out over and over, so I don't think it was as impactful for me as the Nynaeve trial. But the thing that did stick out to me is when she finishes the third one, she's like complaining to all the other Aes Sedai, like, will I ever be free of him? Like, I get it. We're tied together. And she's like frustrated about it. Like, how much how does everything I have to do involves my relationship with Rand? And I think that's just like the interesting nature of Taveren and their relationship, where it's like she's like figuring it out, and I don't know how she's gonna react to it. And that's one of the things that I think is what's keeping me at this point still interested in their relationship, because it's not supposed to work, but you also know that they're like hopelessly connected as well. So something doomed to fail, but also doomed to succeed at the same time. So like, that kind of stuff is super like keeping me going, I would say, keeping me interested. Very cleverly done by Jordan, to where it's like, okay, you still don't know how it's going to play out. Like, sometimes in these will they, won't they, you're like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, we know one way or the other. We have our expectations. But in this one, it's like both are explored and both are kind of destined. So what the heck is what's happening, So that's the interesting thing about Egwene that I get from the trials.
Yeah, no, I never thought about it that way, but you're making really interesting points, Charles. That feels like a second read notice, is like that Egwene is super frustrated by this. I guess to me, I was so focused on the actual events that were happening in the Accepted that I was not seeing Egwene's reaction to them as much as you did.
Yeah, that quote just stuck out with me in this read through for whatever reason. Maybe it's like just knowing what's happening, going to happen, like picking up on something like.
That's a great pull.
Reaction, yeah.
It's really interesting.
I don't have
I'm going to keep that in mind about Egwene.
Was like, am I never going to be like, she's just literally came through the gate. She's still like naked. They're pouring the cold water on her, and she's like, am I never going to be like free of him? Like, like that kind of, I forget the exact line, but it was along that sentiment. Where
we got to find that. That's super interesting, Charles.
It's in that chapter. I'll have to pull it out. Yeah. But yeah, that's the one. And that was an interesting reaction, where she acknowledges that she's hopelessly entwined with him, and she's just frustrated and doesn't know what to do. It's like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? It's a fair question for her. Like, imagine you just like all like Nynaeve, her three were all different. Like, she was fighting an enemy, she was dealing with land, and then she was dealing with her home, like leaving her home that needed her. All three were different. Egwene, all three were ran, and she's kind of frustrated at this moment. She's like, why is it always Rand? Like,
yeah, no, that's super cool. It brings it back to some of what we were talking about before, where these things where everything seems to revolve around our main character to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
are so well, I'll say it, woven into the actual world and the plot, and the characters can interact with the way that they're being treated as characters
Yes.
almost.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Egwene is kind of
You nailed it.
interacting with the idea that she is this character that's almost defined by her relationship with Rand.
Yes.
Meanwhile, she's trying so hard to forge her own path and do her own thing.
And she accomplishes a
And
lot.
it's like,
You know?
oh yeah, you have in the notes here, Charles, to talk about standout characters and stuff,
Yeah.
and I guess I'll talk more about Egwene during that and what sticks out to me about her. But one thing certainly is how proactive she is compared to some of these other characters. And she's out there doing this stuff and really trying. And the hand of Robert Jordan, otherwise known as the way the wheel turns, I guess, the pattern keeps weaving her back toward Rand, and she's like, I'm trying to have my own plot line.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, she kind of gets robbed of the trials, and then you've got to do 3 different things. She got to do variations of the same thing over and over.
One was land, but...
Yeah, one was land,
one.
but she got to fight a guy,
Yeah.
and then she got to go back to the 2 rivers, So she got 3 different trials to go through, and they felt different, and that's what what stuck out to be about 90. It's like, it's interesting how that pursuit of power and responsibility has you turning on people you love sometimes, and that to me was super interesting, and all the different ways in which she had to turn her back on the things she loved. So yeah,
Egwene just has to turn her back on Rand over and over again.
Yeah, she has to just face tragedy with Rand over and over. It's like, and this one, Rand asks you to kill him, and this one, Rand kills himself, and this one, Rand does this. You're like, oh, okay, like, cool. So you had mentioned it briefly, and now we're here. What are some of the standout moments, characters for you in Dragon Reborn that we haven't talked about already?
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to hear from yours as well, Charles, but yeah, sure. Let's start with characters, just because we were just talking about Egwene, and I want to talk more about what I like about Egwene while it's still on topic here. I think that something that sticks out to me is that proactive nature of her that I was just mentioning, where it's like this is a series that so far has been characterized so much by these reluctant characters.
Right.
I actually searched in my Kindle copy for how many times the word reluctant or some form of it appears in the Dragon Reborn.
Oh gosh.
And this was probably less reluctance than some other ones.
Yeah, you have to compare it to the other book.
But just searching this one, it was 28 times. So that's more than once every 2 chapters is the word reluctant. So I was like, is that a lot? Because it feels like it's a lot, because I kept seeing that word come up over and over again. So I searched a book that's very different, Charles. I searched The Poppy War, which I have a Kindle copy of, and that's a character that is Rin, the main character. It's very focused on her, and she is the opposite of reluctant, I would say. Extremely proactive. The books are pretty similar length. 673 pages in paperback for The Dragon Reborn, and there's 544 pages in paperback for Poppy War. Do you want to guess how many times the word reluctant appears in some form in the Poppy War, or you want me to just say it?
Yeah, I'm going to guess really little, like 5.
6. Nailed it.
Oh, I was so close.
That's really good. Yeah, no, and only twice does it refer to our protagonist.
Wow.
It was really easy to find because there weren't a lot to look through. And it was... And I love Rin as a character, by the way. So that's a Poppy War by Rebecca Kwong, or R.F. Kwong is what she goes by on those books. So I say all of that to bring us back to Egwene. And Egwene starts to learn how to use these powers, and right from the start of this book, she's like, okay, I'm not who I used to be anymore. In chapter 11, there's this line where she says she'd already gone beyond being an innkeeper's daughter. Those bonds would not hold her again either, not because she hated them, but because she had outgrown them. And she's basically been in on this for a long time, but just getting these a lot of point of view with her and getting her being well past that already, while Rand's finally done being a shepherd, and Perrin's still like, I'm a blacksmith. We've got Egwene who's like, I'm so past being an innkeeper's daughter, and she's actually aware of it. And she also gets these moments where they're like surrounded by these white cloaks, I think it was, and they're like, we're gonna we're mad at you, Aes Sedai. We're gonna get you in trouble. And Egwene's just sitting there, and she's probably the least powerful person in the whole mix. But she's just like, forget these people. They're they're annoying us. We're way more powerful than them. And she just makes the ground start exploding near them.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is really early in the book. I'm like, yes, Egwene.
Yes.
Thank you. Everyone, Moraine could make these people, Moraine I don't think was there during that, but it's like there was one other Aes Sedai, Varen, or sorry if I'm getting that name
There's
wrong,
Varen Sedai, yeah.
Yeah, I think Varen was there. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but one of the actual Aes Sedai was there. And I was like, I know you're not supposed to use these powers, but also do something. You're so much more powerful than these people, and Egwene does it. And I appreciate that about her. So she continues to stick out to me here. I like her getting to explore some of these new powers with the dreaming and stuff like that. And so it's her, and I also, Matt steals the show too, but I've got one more standout character, which is Elaine. And I would say she's kind I feel like Robert Jordan didn't really know what to do with Elaine. For the first couple books, it's he needed this princess in the mix for whatever he's working on. I'm sure that I feel very confident that she's going to marry Rand eventually, but she started to take on this interesting peacekeeper role between Nynaeve and Egwene, who are both very stubborn folks. And at one point she just slaps Egwene
in the face.
I was like, Elaine,
that was pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Egwene takes that really well too. I would have not taken it the same way as Egwene did. Egwene was like, "Oh, it's weird. You just hit me." I would have been like, "What? You did not."
Yeah, but I don't know. I kind of think it's Elaine is so even-tempered. She handles herself really well. She's exactly the person. It's almost I think her personality for Jordan seemed to start emerging when he realized who he needed to exist, when Egwene and Nynaeve were being themselves. Yeah. And then Elaine is this really interesting character who grew up in this political court environment, is able to handle these two extreme personalities
and of all of them,
in a way where she emerges as well.
For authority, right, as the daughter heir.
Yeah, and in that way she's kind of the one who is able to control, though, because the other two are so pulling in the other direction that whichever way Elaine kind of starts to negotiate toward is usually, what happens. So but when she needs to, she's willing to just slap Egwene. So I don't know. I was like, I think that's part of why Egwene takes it well, is oh my god, I made Elaine slap me. I must be really out of control here.
That's true.
So it's I don't know. She really emerged in this as she's the maybe not my in the NBA or NFL they'll give a MVP,
right?
And maybe that would probably go to Rand every year, but in this maybe the most valuable player in terms of my favorite character of it is probably Egwene or Matt. But Elaine gets most improved player.
Yeah,
that's another
true.
award
Yeah.
they give out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she definitely
to get
wins that
a voice, and it's interesting to see her fill that role. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and unless you have more on Elaine, I do want to hear your favorite your
I don't really have too much more on
Charles.
Elaine. Not a whole lot happened. Like you said, it was nice to see her doing stuff, and I feel as Jordan goes further and further away from the eye of the world, and he's starting to write characters just in situations where they're talking and chilling at Tarvalin or whatever. Her voice is finally being allowed to come out, and it's good.
Right.
You know, I feel like the more Jordan lets himself just be relaxed and write his characters doing stuff that they want to do, it's a lot of fun, you know? So in those moments, I think Elaine finally got the benefit from that. So looking forward to reading more about that, I would say.
Yeah. Go Elaine.
Who
are your standout characters?
I found that quote from Egwyne, though, before we move on from Egwyne. Remember I was talking about her one about Rand?
Yes.
So this happens, right? So she has her third vision, and it's the 13, Myrddraal trying to convert her to being a dark friend or whatever, and she passes the test, and it's a light. Okay, so she pulls out. Egwyne stepped out of the arch, cold and stiff with anger. She wanted the iciness of anger to counter the searing of memory. Her body remembered burning, but other memories scored and scorched more deeply. Anger cold as death. Is that all there is for me, she demanded? To abandon him again and again, to betray him, fail him again and again? Is that what there is for me? And she keeps going on and on. But that's the whole shtick of it. Like, she's like, is that who I am? The person that fails Rand 1,000 times over? And is that all I'm capable of? So that was a really interesting, like, standout moment for me. And
gotcha.
Kate Redding did such a good job with that in the audiobook. If you go back, it's the very beginning of chapter 23. Highly recommend giving that a listen, because she really went all in on the, is that all there is for me? Like, really, really good.
Yeah, well, who knows? I've been switching back and forth between audio and Kindle, and I feel like, maybe I wasn't reading. Maybe I was on the Kindle for that one, because it sounds like you took it differently. I remember reading that line now, and I was just like taking it as Egwene was upset that she was going to keep failing him.
It's anger.
But you took it more as like she's upset that she's so tied to him.
Yeah, well, if you read
and,
right
can't define
before
her
it,
own
it's like her body remembered burning, but other memories scored and scorched more deeply. Anger cold as death. And she steps out of the arch stiff with anger. So she's like really PO'd right now. And I think a large part of that is because she keeps failing Rand and all of these visions and dreams that she has. Like you said, it's like, oh man, another Rand thing. And they're all always bad. And she's so frustrated. I think, one, in that she's always failing, but two, in that seems to be just her role in Destiny, is to be that counterpart to Rand. So while there's a lot of weird, womanizer stuff with Matt, every so often you get characters like Egwene that are just so amazing, and she's is this all I am? Like, I'm more than this. And that's such a honest, true, powerful piece, because I feel that as the reader. I'm like, we both are like, oh great, another Rand vision, but the character's frustrated too. And you kind of nailed it, where it's like, what's so unique about the Wheel of Time is that characters are being pulled by their destiny, and they get to react to it. They get to be frustrated by it, upset by it. They get to fear it or want to turn away from it, try to avoid it. And it's just so interesting to see how all these different characters are trying to exist with that.
It's like they can almost be mad at Robert Jordan for using them in that way.
Exactly.
And it's like, Egwene, we as the readers are like, is this all there is for Egwene? But she's such a great character. Why is she just the person who fails Rand over and over again?
She's like, I can do
she's
stuff
got to
too.
be
like,
more than
and
that.
She
and
feels
Egwene
the same
is
way.
like, aren't I? Yeah. And it's again one of those, like, our experience mirroring the characters, and we feel for her so much in that moment. No, I think you dug deeper than I did on that one. Like, I think that it's there, right? Like, you can read it as like, am I just the person who fails over and over again, and being upset about the failing of Rand?
Right.
But you can also read it in the way you did, to take it both ways of like, am I bound to just fail Rand over and over again? Like, all I am is a person who interacts with this person, and not even a way of succeeding.
Yeah,
but I'm
not even a way I have any
choice.
Like, I'm just kind of a set piece in Rand's destiny over and over. Like the thing he gets to pine over and lose constantly. It's like, great. Can I be more than that, please? Like, I can shoot fireballs and make the earth shake and all these other things. So, for that, that made her really interesting. She's definitely maybe my number 2, but I think Matt just
Ooh.
steals the show.
Yes.
He gets to do so many
That's
fun
totally
things.
fair.
He gets to have all these cheeky moments. He gets to escape the Aes Sedai. He's like discovering his I'm gonna call it, for lack of a better word, magic, but it's really just luck in his favor, and he doesn't understand it at all. It's still a mystery, but he's, for pardon the pun here, rolling with it, and
Nailed it.
and he's doing a great job of it. And it's kind of refreshing to see a character like Matt exist in this world where it's like, yeah, you could try and fight these things or get frustrated by them, or you could make the best of it and see how far you can go with your own indulgences, and
roll with those punches.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was Matt, and like you said, like once we started seeing his character and writing from his POV, it's like you really got to see Jordan's writing abilities. It's like, wow, this is a character with a really interesting, unique voice in the series that we've had to read 3 books to get to. It's like, what more is Jordan capable of? And I think he's like discovering these characters, and they're getting better. And Matt's one of those that has benefited by far the most. So it's Matt and Egwyne, I think, are in the top 2. And then I just love the treatment of Rand, and we already talked about all the reasons why I love that. But so I'd say Rand is in the mix as well, if only for the change in perspective of how we see and read about Rand. So
the use
character.
of Rand. Yeah. And that you make awesome points there, Charles. Totally agree with your thoughts about Matt as someone. It's like, dude, what have you been waiting for to get this guy going? And now he's finally going, so it has me. I think I ended Dragon Reborn like most excited about the future of our Wheel of Time buddy read as I've ever been. I know we're
just
taking
in time for the hiatus,
but Matt is a big reason for that. Where there's always things that Jordan instilled more faith in me as to like what he's capable of and what kind of stuff he's going to bring us. Matt probably does deserve the most improved, even over Elaine. But that being said, if he's going to win MVP, they're not going to give the same person 2 awards. It's kind of the politics of these awards anyway in those spring events. So I think we can give MVP to Matt and still give most improved to Elaine.
Right.
Because it's kind of for the like
and
upstart.
Maybe give best moment to
Egwyne, Well, so here's my maybe best moment though, Charles.
Let's hear it.
It doesn't go to any of those characters. It goes to a character that we haven't given a lot of attention to, which is Moraine. And it's after all of this balefire build, just constant balefire. Right. It's like over and over again, like balefire. What's balefire? What is this balefire thing? Wondered Egwyne for the 1,000th time.
Egwyne wondering is so frustrating. Like, Matt keeps telling me, I'm coming, Egwyne. What does that mean? It's like, what do you think that means, Egwyne? It means he's coming in your direction.
Uh-oh.
But like 3 times, she's like, I keep dreaming about Matt saying he's coming. Oh, these visions are so confusing, so cryptic.
What could it mean that Perrin was holding an axe and a hammer and saying, I don't know if I want to be a blacksmith or if I want to be a warrior who wields an axe? It's just so cryptic.
Egwyne, read a book.
Read a book. Okay.
She's got some work to do with her interpretations.
Well, Mr. Miller, our English teacher from high school, would not be happy with Egwyne. This is Charles. He was in the AP
Mr.
English
Miller
class, and he's not happy.
For sure. He would figure it all out.
So, well, let's not let Egwyne steal the show from Moraine after all this. So we get the balefire build up so much. We get to see her kind of use it, but not in like a big stake situation. And she's kind of just like, this is something I really should not do. Like no one's used this in like thousands of years, but I know how to do it. And there's this moment where Bilal, one of the Forsaken, is kind of like beating Rand.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh crap, after all of this, like Rand, you won't take Kalendor basically because someone's asking you to. But then later you will. That was hard to figure out.
I think but Bilal was trying to force him to take it as a trap. Like he was trying to trick him to take it so he could then somehow like take it for himself. You know what I'm saying? Like he needed Rand to take it first. So it was a trap.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that was what Rand was doing or not, but that's what Moraine was kind of saying. Like, oh, Bilal wants Rand to come and take Kalendor so that he could then use it for himself somehow.
Gotcha.
I don't remember all
somehow that went over my head, but yeah, I was kind of confused a little bit by what was going on there. But the point was that Bilal was like doing his thing and he was beating Rand sorta, and then he sees Moraine coming and he's like not taking Moraine seriously. It's like, and he's got this line where it's like, this is Bilal, I thought you were neatly out of the way, woman. No matter, you are only an annoyance, a stinging fly, a bite me. I will cage you with the others and teach you to serve the shadow with your puny powers. He finished with a contemptuous laugh and raised his free hand. Moraine had not stopped or slowed while he spoke. She was no more than 30 paces from him when he moved his hand, and she raised both of hers as well. And then she basically just shoots this bar, like balefire, bar of white fire hotter than the sun shot from the Aes Sedai's hands is the line. And she just burns him. He's like, no! And she burns him into nothing.
Him, yeah.
And it's just this beautiful moment of like, I love that line where it's like, Moraine had not stopped or slowed while he spoke. So I just imagine this guy like, ha ha ha, like, I will destroy you. You're just a fly. And she's just like, boom. Like, balefire, you're dead. And I'm like, Moraine, you are such a badass.
I thought of you too, because you're always
so
like,
cool.
oh, Moraine's so proactive. That's what makes her so good. And like, oh, she's actually out there shooting fireballs when Gandalf never had the courage to do such a thing. And then I was like, oh, Dylan's gonna love this.
It's like, dude, that's, I talk so much about the proactive characters, and it's like, dude, like, this guy is doing his little like James Bond villain bit of talking about his big plans to make you go in a cage and serve the shadow, and Moraine's like, while he's talking and laughing, I'm just gonna shoot fire until this guy incinerates. And I'm like, yeah, you go, Moraine, that's exactly what you should do. And she did it. So yeah, I sometimes lament that we don't get to see Gandalf use his powers as much as I would hope a wizard would think to in all these disastrous situations. And Moraine, she just gets out there and she does the thing. And she did the thing, Charles. She didn't hesitate. Beautiful moment from Moraine there. So that's my standout moment.
That's a great moment to pick, and couldn't have said it better myself. That's such a, like, the rising action that we were always expecting was, this whole idea of taking Kalendor and all that. But watching Moraine, like, she's not the dragon reborn, but she knows, like, hey, these are the tools. Maybe some of them are forbidden or whatever, but I can do them, and like, this is what needs to be done. And it was so satisfying in those moments to see the payoff of her actually using the balefire. And yeah, definitely moves her into the badass territory for sure. Like, that was hardcore.
Yeah. So I feel like, we couldn't spoil things in that Wizard Battle Royale episode, but I don't know. I feel like, what if she just whipped out balefire on Gandalf? I don't know, man. This is a game changer, because like, well, she just did that. I feel like there's no one in the competition we did. This might have like no context. We did an episode where we did a wizard battle royale and like speculated on who would win among 4 wizards. Among them were Moraine and Gandalf and others. And I'm like, I don't know. What if she just whipped out balefire on their asses, Charles?
That is a very strong card. I mean, Moraine has the advantage of we know what she can do, and we've seen it, and it's very effective. So it's like, that's hard to go up against, from some of these other characters that they can do stuff when it suits them, but we don't know exactly what they're capable of. Like, could they potentially dodge a balefire blast? You don't know. And
that seems hard.
It seems very difficult. Certainly Bilal was not able to do it. So,
tough sitch for Bilal.
Yeah, you feel bad. He underestimated his opponent. So I don't think we should underestimate Moraine either in the Battle Royale. No. Which is why she earned the number 2 spot in that poll, which was well earned. And Gandalf, it's a popularity contest, but we're all impressed with Moraine. Yeah, man, like, I feel like we talked about all my favorite moments. Like, Egwene's trial, Perrin in the blacksmith shop, Matt being Matt. Like, these are all moments I really liked. The final showdown. I there's one moment or a series of moments that, I feel like now, Dylan, you are brought into this world and Twitter of time that you can now be a part of, and that is the braid pulling. This was something that you had even asked in our Friends Pitching Fantasy, like, I've heard there's a lot of braid pulling. So when we cracked the cover on Eye of the World, I was keeping track of it. And I was like, you know what? No one's really pulling their braids a lot. And then we get to Dragon Reborn, and all of a sudden we get Nynaeve's POV, and it's like Robert Jordan was sitting at a cafe writing Dragon Reborn, and he's like, pulling the braid? That's an interesting quirk, and just like wrote that into everything she did, And it took off in this book.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been tracking this too, because this is like, there wasn't a lot I knew about Wheel of Time heading in. Mm-hmm. And one of the few things I knew was that there was a lot of braid pulling and like skirt smoothing is the other one. But braid pulling is like the number
just
one.
Because it's such a bizarre action.
It's like strange.
Like skirt smoothing, you're like, okay.
It's like people do that.
People do that. Yeah. No one pulls on their braids as like a tick,
Yeah, it would be very rare.
Yeah.
And I was tracking it, and I think we got one, maybe two in the first two books. And there was, I think, in Eye of the World, I like took note. I was like, we got a little braid pull. Yeah. And I was like, here it comes. And and in the Eye of the World, when that happened, I think there was a little like, she does that sometimes when she's angry. I'm like, oh, God, it's going to be this big thing. And then crickets, Charles.
Yeah,
crickets for the longest time. Mm-hmm. It's like, I was begging for some braid pulling just to be like, where is it? Yeah. So then we get to the Dragon Reborn, and I regretted every bit of wanting to see braid pulling, because I was ready, Charles. I was ready to like dismiss the braid pulling thing as like, okay, like, yeah, it's a weird thing, but it hardly ever happens, all this kind of stuff. And then this time, another word I searched, Charles, was braid, and it appears 45 times in the Dragon Reborn. That's almost twice as much as Reluctant.
How many times does it come up in the Poppy War?
So,
less than 6, question. I bet.
So less than 45 is pretty safe. So I think that's a great question, Charles. You're asking the right questions. Didn't think to search that one. So then I totally lost my train of thought. It's like, so the braid pulling just started happening a lot. So I did what I do, Charles, which is try to make sense of this. Like, why is this happening over and over and over again? And it's when she's irritated, right? It's when she's starting to get angry even. And I was like, is this Robert Jordan trying to, like, use the fact that we know that Nynaeve's channeling depends on her being angry and almost giving us a sign of like, is it coming now? Is she about to start channeling because she's getting angry? So it's like, did he need this device to be a signal to the reader?
He didn't write it that way.
Well,
as an indicator that she's angry, yes, but
it is that. Yeah. But it's not this like, I don't know. We'll see. There's 11 more books of braid
like
pulling
the Hulk
to
where
see
she's
if he
like,
uses
I'm
it
always
that way.
angry. Boo! You don't get that. She has to do a little braid tugging to get there.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see, because it wasn't like this thing where once she starts pulling the braid, the channeling is about to come. But it is a thing that I think we could use as a sign there that she is going to potentially channel, and I was interested if seeing that's a thing that like Robert Jordan uses in the future as kind of this signpost. Hey, here it comes. But maybe I'm off.
No, that's well said. And I also feel like obviously the braid is a huge part of Nynaeve's identity, like the tie to her world in the Two Rivers.
Yes.
And she refuses to let it go. And she refuses, like, she always sees the Aes Sedai as, like, the enemy. Because that's another moment in this book that we didn't talk about, where Egwene comes back from her trials and she's crying. And like Nynaeve's already holding Elaine in one arm and Elaine's crying, so Egwene just runs into her other arm and she's holding both of them, consoling them. It's like, we'll get them for what they did to us, something like that. She's like, she clearly hates Moraine more than anybody for taking them all out of the Two Rivers.
Right.
And she doesn't really like the Aes Sedai. She just wants to learn how to use her power to basically like turn it against them or something. So like, that the braid is part of her defiance and all of that. Like Egwene let the braid go a long time ago, or refused to ever wear it, or whatever the situation was.
She started wearing that bow.
Yeah, and Nynaeve was like,
halfway between.
Have you forgotten where you came from? So I think that's Egwene. It's part of Nynaeve's stubbornness, is that she's holding on to that Two Rivers. She doesn't forget where she came from or what she wants to go back to, and that don't feel like she's one of the Aes Sedai just because she's like training to be an Aes Sedai. Like, she's doing it for her own reasons, and she's very much got her own agenda. And so I think it's also a reminder of that a little bit. Doesn't make it any less overused, though. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's just such a bizarre action, so it stands out every time. It's kind of funny. It's just kind of funny. It's just a rite of passage for a Wheel of Time reader, and I'm happy you got the experience of reading it 40-something times.
Yeah. I felt like by the end of it, I was walking through those silver arches.
Only 11 books to go.
It was my trial. Yeah. Well, I guess how many? I'm not even a third of the way through,
Nope.
So it's not even like I've gone through the first of the 3 silver arches. Yeah, no, there's a lot more braid pulling, I'm sure, for us to see. And oh, Charles, we didn't get to talk about, but can I get some props for calling the Lanfear one? That Selene is Lanfear. I don't think it's officially revealed, but
I mean,
they don't ever say like
at the very end they say, "Oh, Lanfear was there or is here or whatever is involved in it." Or
yeah, but they don't say it's Selene. Selene's the name, right? That like she was using. It's just like you can connect that Selene was also described as wearing the same clothes as Lanfear and doing the same things, telling people to wield the horn for glory and things like that. Right. So it's like, yeah, they do get the Lanfear. I can't tell if Robert Jordan wants us to still not be 100% sure that Selene is Lanfear, but that's
pretty much how this book ends. Was like, hey, remember Lanfear? She's around. So you're like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, Selene is obviously bad news and like suspicious from her from the get go. But yeah, you tapped into it pretty quickly, which was very good. Yeah. It's just one of those things. Robert Jordan, sometimes a little heavy-handed with him being ominous, but I think this was a bit more intentional. I don't think it was ever supposed to be this, like, shocking twist more than it was, like, a slow realization. Like, that kind of thing,
Yeah. I think he wants you to know she's suspicious for sure. Yeah. I don't know if he wants you to know she's Lanfear even still. Like, maybe you're supposed... Like, it's hard to say, because there's no, like... With Jordan, I kind of expect there to be some moment where it's like, Selene is Lanfear. It's like, he kind of does do that when he does his reveals, right? Like, so we're still kind of waiting for that, but it's pretty clear at this point. So I'm going to count myself 1 for 1 on my theories. Is that fair, Charles?
You got that one for sure. I haven't really been keeping track. I don't think any of the other ones have been proven or disproven. We got to read 11 more books before we'll know
so
for sure.
100%.
That's not how it works. But sure.
Yeah.
You're off to a great start. I'll say that. Couldn't do any better.
Right. And are we still planning on maybe doing a theorizing episode where we see where I'm at?
If you have enough of them to do it, I think that would be great, especially as we enter our hiatus.
I'm sure I could probably fill a half hour or so.
Then let's do it.
Yeah,
we've got some time in between. We're picking up a couple fun books in between book 3 and book 4 of Wheel of Time, so it's going to be a few weeks. Got to keep that Wheel of Time content turning. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we would be remiss if we did not bring up Dylan, the character that you've kind of like brought into the Twitter sphere is kind of dominating the conversation around our Wheel of Time conversations, and that is Loyal the Ogier. You made a specific point to talk about Loyal, and before we wrap it up, I want you to tell me what it is that you want to talk about when it comes to Loyal.
Nah, I don't really want to talk about Loyal.
Okay, great, everybody. Thanks for listening.
He started writing a book, Charles.
He did.
Loyal started writing a book.
He had to have a reason to stick around, you know?
Yeah, still trying to figure out what the deal is with Loyal. I feel like he's one of those characters that other people seem to understand the charm of, and it's just kind of lost on me.
Right.
I think. Like, Charles, I'm curious. Are you a Loyal fan? You've kind of stayed silent on the issue.
I don't really have a strong opinion on Loyal. Like, for me, he's kind of interesting, and it's fun to watch Matthew Kramer do his deep voice for Loyal. He's like, Rand, studying Shentai. So, like, that's kind of fun, but he's not the most proactive character. There's not a lot that he's servicing plot-wise, so I just never really thought about him that much. It's just funny that he keeps talking about being hasty, and that's kind of a conversation that we've had before Wheel of Time. So now it's like, okay, this is fun, you know? I'm enjoying this.
You see, this is why it sticks out to me, is because there's something about you reading Loyal, Charles, where you're like picking up on this. He doesn't really have a role. He's just kind of there, and he's taking up time and space and not really doing much of anything. And characters like that, and he's not proactive at all. And characters like that, just you move past them and say like, okay, that's not something to think about. And I just ruminate about like why is this person here? What is going on? And the thing about Loyal is that, and this happens to me with treebeard as well.
Boy.
Sorry to.
Don't get into treebeard. I actually really like.
I was on Twitter today. I don't hide my opinions about treebeard and Loyal either. The whole time I'm like, what are you doing here? This whole thing could be moving along a lot faster if we didn't have to spend time with you. And then what they do is go ahead and invalidate my feelings by telling me to stop being hasty, Charles. That's what I think does it with those characters. Is like, not only do they have that element of why are you here? You're slowing things down, and I'm not particularly interested. But then they're like, don't be hasty, Dylan.
He crossed the path of 3 Taverens. He's hopelessly bound into all this adventure now. He's trapped. You know, he has read about Taverens.
He's not going to let Aes Sedai control him, Charles.
Yeah. Well, he's next, I guess. You know, you never know. But no, he's that's part of it. He's hopelessly pulled into the wake of these other grander characters who are so influenced by the wheel, and now he's just in the mix, and
he's starting to write a book.
You just can't quit him. Yeah,
he's all in on that book. I feel like, I don't know, maybe Robert Jordan like really likes him, thinks he's like this insert character or whatever.
I think Robert Jordan does really like him. Like, he's got a lot of charming qualities. He's a really nice guy. He's willing to stand up for Fael like right away. It's like, guard Fael while she's sleeping. He's like, I will guard her until I die. Like, and it's like, okay, like, you just met this woman, but that's cool. Like, cool that you're willing to do that. You know, I remember him saying something like, you know, I will defend her as long as I'm still alive. Like, no one will get through this door. I'm like, whoa, loyal. That is some commitment. So, you know, he's got these charming qualities, but he doesn't, like, do anything for me in particular. He's there, you know, he's fine, he's fun. He's a little, you know, something interesting. It's fun when they're rolling into town and everyone's like, whoa, it's an Ogier, and how different cities react to Ogier. Some, like, think he's a Trolloc. Others, like, oh, we have an Ogier bed for you. Like, we've been waiting, you know? So it's kind of interesting to see the different reactions, and it just adds a little spice to Robert Jordan's world. I think, another point of view, another perspective,
Yeah,
another
well,
race.
here's where I'll go with that, Charles. I think there's plenty of spice already in Robert
It's very
Jordan's
spicy.
world, and there's a lot of awesome things. I think as we keep moving through the series, or even just 3 books in, I see it breathing more and coming into its own more, and that goes for the world, the plot, and the characters. All of them, even Loyal, but all of them are starting to just develop and find their voice, I guess, in a way that I hadn't seen before. So I think I might even say so far each book has been better than the last
Wow.
for me with Wheel of Time. Yeah, I think I can say that with confidence so far.
That's fair.
I
I kind of agree.
Yeah,
I'm realizing that I agree. Yeah, that's true.
right. And I imagine I imagine from what I've heard that there will be a slog at some point. I can't really reasonably expect it to just get better and better with each book. But I don't know, Charles. I feel like here's what I thought. If I'm being honest about where I was heading into this series, Charles,
Okay.
with how hasty
Okay.
I can be, I thought that 3 books in I would be really ready to take a big break, and I'd be like, I'm really glad we're going on this hiatus. And I'm not trying to mess up your awesome reading schedule. You put all the work in on there, Charles. I'm happy to do our hiatus, but I thought I'd be like so burned out by this point that I'd really want to change. But this is like the most excited I've been about Wheel of
Wow.
Time, coming off of the 3rd book, and I was a little like almost disappointed I couldn't go in and start the 4th one, which is it's not where I thought I'd be after 3 long books. I thought I'd be looking for something different, but I'm in, Charles.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I'm a little bit looking forward to the hiatus. I mean, it's only a few weeks. It's not that long, and like Robert Jordan, his books are long, right? I don't know if they're meant to be marathon through the entire way, and I'm looking forward to a few weeks break. But like you said, the books have been getting better with every passing, and I'm excited to watch these characters grow. I think what makes this book so much better than the first one is that we get less Lord of the Rings parallels and more Robert Jordan's voice. And we're finally letting these characters grow out of those parallels and into the world that Robert Jordan's built. So we're starting to see a lot of the payoffs of Jordan's creativity. And it's really exciting. Like we've learned more about the magic systems of Sayadar and Sayadine, which I think are so creative. And I really am just interested to see where they go. And we've got, can't forget about the Damani, can't forget about like the stuff Perrin can do and Matt can do and Elaine can do. And not Elaine, Egwyne can do. So like,
Hey,
like Elaine
give
doesn't...
Elaine some credit. Most improved player.
Most improved, but I'm talking about like, for lack of a better word, magical abilities. Like Perrin can be a wolf brother and Egwyne can walk in dreams, like all these things. So like learning more about all those.
Can we mention that Hopper the Wolf is basically, I don't know if this can I spoil episode 4 of Star Wars, like literally the first ever Star Wars? And it's not like a big spoiler.
Okay, like just be warned if you don't want Star Wars spoiled. I think you can kind of,
but we're almost at the end.
Thank you for listening. Go to Twitter,
yes.
like and all that stuff.
Rate 5 stars.
Rate 5 stars. Thank you, and thanks for listening, man. That was really awesome. I'm glad we didn't spoil Star Wars for you. Go watch it. It's a great movie.
It's such a it didn't even warrant. I think it's just that Hopper's like the Obi-Wan kind of for right, because like Hopper's like dead, but in Perrin's dreams and kind of in his head,
like a spiritual guide,
telling him to use the Force. And it's like, so I guess the spoiler is that Obi-Wan dies in episode 4.
I don't think it counts as a spoiler,
like,
but we try hard here not to spoil anything. So
we try so hard, and
be ashamed to ruin Star Wars for someone out there.
Yeah, that would be a shame. So, but yeah, Hopper's kind of that equivalent, right?
Yeah.
Where kind of in Perrin's head, kind of mentoring him. Like his mentor is basically a wolf, or a wolf is basically his mentor.
Yeah,
it's probably a better way to phrase that. It's like he's definitely a wolf.
But a wolf is basically his mentor. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's an interesting.
I'm about that.
Yeah, I'm about it too. It's interesting. It's different. And it fits into Perrin's personality in an interesting way. So I'm looking forward to reading more about it. He's starting to maybe use it more, and like it's interesting to see him accept it more, which is what we want from a lot of these characters.
Young Bull.
Young Bull, that's right.
Perrin. Yeah.
Some great names throughout the series, and it's just another example. Yep. Such an imaginative series. I'm always impressed by the creativity of it, the expanse of it, like how much fun it is. And we can talk more about the magic systems and stuff in future episodes, but is there anything else you wanted to mention about the Dragon Reborn before we get out of here?
Just that I'm sure we'll be, even though we keep saying hiatus, I'm sure we'll be coming out with more Wheel of Time content in the meantime to keep talking about this awesome series and try to have some fun with where we're at right now and see what kind of episodes we can get cooked up.
Yeah, we'll be back in like a month's time, but with a book discussion. But in between now and then, we will be talking about Wheel of Time throughout. So don't worry, the conversation won't stop. We're just going to read a few other books in the meantime for all those people that have not read Wheel of Time and want us to talk about other books. It's hard to read 14 books straight, So, yeah, this is another great work, and, really excited to get into book 4, and appreciate you all for listening. Should we get into that sweet, sweet outro music?
Let's get into that sweet, sweet outro music, Charles.
All righty then. Thank you, everybody, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, check us out on Twitter over at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end. You can also check us out on Instagram and Facebook at the FTF Podcast. If you want to send us a message, you can always email us at the ftfpodcast@gmail.com. Now, Dylan, if someone was listening to our show on Apple Podcasts and they really like what they heard and they wanted to support the show in a way that was free and super helpful to us, what could they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just go inside Apple Podcast app, find the Friends Talking Fantasy page, scroll down until you start seeing stars. Once you're seeing stars, the best number to support the show would be to click 5 of those.
Yep.
If you do have a little bit of extra time and you want to write a review, that is always appreciated. But just listening, getting to the end of this Dragon Reborn episode is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.